I'm with the People's Budget Coalition. That's perfect. We'll be recording this, so feel free to share this recording afterwards, and you'll have the slides as well. So absolutely feel free to share this training as we go through this. I think this is really helpful for passing on this institutional knowledge to the kind of people in your organization who work with any kind of grant with the city, with a funder. I think it's helpful for everybody to be familiar with these baseline tools. So as we get into it, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I can't super monitor the chat, although there will be some chat participation, but absolutely feel free to speak up when you have something you'd like to share. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and get us into it. Feel free to keep introducing yourself in the chat as we go along. And this is my email, and feel free to reach out and we'll touch a little bit more on who people's budget is later on. So the agenda for today, we're trying to answer the central question: how do we message about our program's effect? And with that, we're going to talk about how we craft a message, how we use data-led messaging, and how we use people-led messaging. They're a little bit different, but they overlap, and they have specific targets. And so this is going to be a pretty involved training. So I'm going to be asking for member participation as we go along. With that, I wanted to open us up with what messaging should be. So messaging, storytelling, communications, media, these are all the kind of umbrella terms that we use. And it's about how we communicate about the work that we do. And in chat, if folks could put maybe their answer to why it's important for us to message. Why is it important that we know? Why did you come to this training essentially? Why is it important that we know how to do these skills well? Marianne shared in the chat to share our impact. Celia shared sharing information and services so we can accurately share our mission, so we're not working in silos. Absolutely. So these are all great reasons, gives a face and a story to our donors. So these are, so as we can start to see from these answers, and feel free to keep on putting them in the chat. What we can see from these answers is there's a variety of ways that we use messaging, and there's a variety of reasons why we do messaging. And it's all the same tools that we can use for a variety of problems and issues. And here's some examples that I've thought of. If some folks are kind of familiar with some of the circumstances last year, it's important to message about the work that we do, because this is a quote that we all heard last year. The sugary drinks programs are not a priority because outreach programs are not a priority. This was a quote that we heard from the mayor's office, from the city last year when they made substantial cuts to the sugary drinks program. This is something that we heard, and that maybe hits us all in a different way to reread that kind of quote, because we all know the sugary drinks programs, they don't necessarily do outreach only. And to say that outreach programs are not a priority, and it's not really in line with our values as well. But this is a quote that we heard continually last year. Another one that we've been hearing over the past few years: food programs need to wind down because the pandemic is over. We've heard that, and heard that in itself is messaging that's being used against us at the moment. Again, probably hits you in a certain kind of way. The pandemic is not over. It doesn't mean the food programs have to wind down, even if COVID magically went away, just like that. So these are some important things, and I want to ask for a couple of people to come off mute And this might be a little time for us to commiserate and some of the anger that we're feeling right now about the inaccurate messaging that's going on federally and in our own city. I wonder if a couple of people can come off of mute and share a quote that you remember where somebody confidently spread misinformation.
I can share one. I still remember this was many years ago when I work on child nutrition issues, as many of us do. When one of a partner who has like not a lot of background in that area said extremely confidently, "There's no evidence that school meals improve kids' health."
Wow, that is memorable. Thank you for sharing that. There another quote, another experience that somebody had. You can move along here, but that's a powerful one. And we hear a lot of misinformation at the federal level right now. We hear it even at our local level quite frequently, where people are very confident that they know what we do, that they know the programs that we provide, and they feel very comfortable telling people what we do. But we are the experts. You guys are the experts, your organization, your community members. You are the experts in the work that you do. So I hope that this training can empower you to speak up against misinformation, but also proactively speak about your program so that we can avoid misinformation and misunderstandings that are used to cut our program. So a central question here is, what do we want to achieve with our messaging? We talked a lot in the chat, a lot of the suggestions talk about this, and sort of the three key things that we're going to narrow on today is that we're hoping to achieve education, as we were just talking about. There's a lot of misinformation about food programs in particular. So we want to educate people on the actual work that we do, the impact, the need. We're also trying to achieve empathy, feelings of understanding about our program that empowers people to be empathetic to our service providers, our frontline workers, our organizations, and most of all, the community members who are a part of our service. Lastly, we are wanting folks to feel inspired to action, whether this be a funder, a donor, a supervisor, a community member. We want them to feel inspired and empowered to take action to help support our work, whether that be through providing a donation, through volunteering, or through uplifting a message to their local supervisor. These are three key things that we want to keep in mind as we introduce our messaging. All right. So here I'm going to talk about the basic steps to use when you're crafting a message. So a message can be in the form of a pitch to donors in an email. It could be a op-ed in the local newspaper. There's a lot of avenues to use these tools, but these are the key building blocks of a messaging pitch. So number one, you want to think about the value at stake. Why should we care? Why should the reader of your piece care about what you're writing about? So this is your creative hook. If you remember any writing exercises back in school, this is your hook. This is the thing to draw people in. You want to identify with the cultural value under it. So we have a value theoretically as a society that children should be fed, that we should promote healthy lifestyles, that people should not starve in our society in America. So identify the cultural value that is under attack at the moment and sort of dwell on that within yourself. And that sort of relates to, what's the promise being broken here? We have a promise to our residents of this city that children won't starve in one of the richest cities in America. Is this the promise that's being broken that you would like to address here? What are we failing to do for our citizens? And I encourage folks when you do this part to write the headline in advance. Write it out. Think about, so you're facing a situation as an organization and you would like to reach out better to sponsors and philanthropists. What does the headline of your email look like? And what does a headline in the paper look like? Does that look like food programs are underfunded in San Francisco? What's the catchy couple of words that sums up what you're going to do? These are important to think about as you begin your writing to frame everything else around it. This is the section where you can be bold, you can be honest, and you can speak truth to power. A lot of messaging, you have to be careful and you have to be strategic. But this, the hook, is the space where you can bring the full force of who you are as a passionate provider in the space. So speak truth to power in this moment. It's the most refreshing and honest part of our messaging campaign. The next building block is the problem. What's going down? What's the issue? Why are you reaching out now? How does this moment compare to last week, last month, or last year? Why are you reaching out right now to a sponsor, to the mayor, to the supervisor? What's the situation at hand, and why is it timely and pressing? As we know, this work is always timely and always feels pressing. It's always an emergency when somebody is hungry, but we need to make it timely, relevant to the moment, center it on what's happening right now that people need to be aware of, even if it feels a little arbitrary, because there's always an emergency going on. We're going to want to try to make it a timely description of what's going on. So this is the thesis. This is what you're trying to get across in your recipe. Clearly present the problem. And with this, it's important that you use language that is accessible to your audience. So whether your audience is longtime donors, or perhaps it's a supervisor who's really familiar with your work, these people are pretty aware of what you do. So you can use language that really accurately describes your program. Whereas if your audience is people who have never donated to you before, a new supervisor, if you've never met with them before, you need to go back to the base of what do people know already? People know that people get hungry and people need food. And sometimes we need to go back to those basics to remind ourselves. And then what information do they absolutely need to know in order to be able to help you? And I call this out because sometimes our donors, the supervisors, the granting departments at the city, they need to know the specific number that you need to keep going. Whereas the general public, maybe they don't need to know the exact number that you need in order to keep this program going. So you can be strategic here on what do they know already and what do they absolutely need to know in order to be able to help you out. What would the average person in San Francisco need to know about your grant program, about the situation, and what's going on in order to be able to talk to their supervisor and say, I support this. And then here's where I encourage you to, this is where we're going to introduce a little bit of the data versus personal storytelling that we're going to get back to later on. But I encourage you here to think about what's the most compelling piece of data that you have. What's the number one thing that when people read that, they go, wow. And it could be different for us providers versus the audience. Things might resonate differently. So I encourage you to try out things, to test it with colleagues, but also maybe test it with your friends and your family and say, like, which of these speaks the most to you? Because we work in this field for so long, different things might feel impactful for us than feel impactful for people who don't really know anything about the space. And then what's the most compelling story that relates to this issue? Can you think of one of your employees or your fellow colleagues who said a quote to you that really stuck with you to describe the moment that we're in? Is there one of your community members who said something that was really compelling? Try to think of what's the most compelling story. Lastly, this is the part about our messaging that often gets lost. And we need to present a positive solution and a positive vision for the world. There is so often, we often have to be in the space of being very reactionary to what's going on. at a federal level, at a local level, providers are always having to be reactionary. And this is the way that we can be proactive. We have to present a positive vision the better way. This is fixable. We can have a San Francisco where people are not hungry. If we just focus on the problem and what's at stake here, it can feel really hopeless. And we do want to give people a little bit of that emphasis on there is a better way. It is absolutely achievable. And this is usually phrased like, we need to ensure that families are fed in San Francisco. We have to deliver on our promise to feed children. We should promote healthy lifestyles in San Francisco. So it's a clear and a positive vision that relates back to the cultural value that we thought of at the very beginning. So we need to present a solution, even if it's just a sentence, just 2 sentences, because you really need to get into the problem in your pitch. You do make sure that you include the solution. Lastly is the call to action. This is another part of messaging that is often forgotten. It's easy enough to, when you write a donor email, the call to action is very built into that. But when you have an introduction meeting with the supervisors, some folks can think, oh, the call to action is we're just introducing ourselves. We're just trying to get to know them. When a reporter calls you and they're asking about your program and about the impact, you're writing an op-ed, what do you want people to do with this? And this is often forgotten, but if you have someone's ear, you should ask for something. That's a bottom line thing that we should always remember. If somebody is listening to you, if they're reading what you have to say, ask for something, even if it's the most low barrier. Keep informed, stay posted, subscribe to our newsletter. If somebody's listening, you should make an ask 100% of the time. And how to craft that ask can be a little tricky. And so for that, you can help narrow the scope. How much can your audience influence the problem here? If your audience is a donor, they can influence the problem by donating. Are they a small dollar donor? Are they a big dollar donor? These kind of things matter for your call to action here, whether you're asking them to put money, be at stake, be a stakeholder in the issue, or contribute whatever you can to this. Sort of changes our phrasing here, whereas if it's a supervisor, you might be asking them to commit fully to funding in San Francisco for food. And I encourage folks to start with the ideal world of the ask. What is the best case scenario? Best case scenario is the person reading this op-ed. Random average San Franciscans, they read your op-ed, and in an ideal world, they send an email to their supervisor and they say, I just read about this amazing program. I want this funded. This is a priority for me. And then what's the most practical? What's the most low barrier ask? If it's stay educated, stay informed, think again before you spread misinformation. Those are pretty low barrier asks, but sometimes they're the most practical when it comes to a larger audience. So I encourage you to meet in the middle from there. In an ideal world, what would they do? What's the most practical thing for them to do? And meet in the middle. Because I encourage folks to not just do the low barrier ask and to not do the heaviest lift ask, but you do want to meet in the middle. You want to push people with your ask a little bit more than perhaps you're comfortable with and they might be comfortable with, but you really want to inspire people to action here. So the way that I think about this when I do this is speak to your sympathetic audience. So I always imagine that I am writing a pitch to somebody who cares and somebody who is going to ask me, how can I help? And so I try to frame everything around that. Is it can feel a little bit hopeless when you feel like your audience doesn't care or is going to be combative or is going to blow you off again. A lot of these outreach and donor emails, we can get a lot of rejection in this space when we ask for things, but I encourage you to stay in the place of positivity and imagine that you are writing to somebody who is going to ask you, how can I help? I really care about this. How can I help? And so just answer them in the most honest way. And if it's, to be honest, I just want you to like read my newsletter every now and again to make me feel heard. That's great. That's wonderful. And people can often do that. If it's $25, you feel free to ask that, but always ask for something. A lot of times people write op-eds in the paper if you get to that sort of advanced stage of messaging and you get to the end and there's no call to action. It's just a description about what's wrong with the current system and what we can do. So it's cool to hear a description of the issue. It's cool to hear some of the legislative fixes that should happen, but there's no call to action for the reader. A lot of news articles are missing this. A lot of statements that you might give out that are informational should still have an ask. An introduction with meeting with your supervisor should have an ask. Even if it's as simple as, can you commit to meeting with us again in 3 months? As low barrier as that is, if you have somebody's ear, you should always ask for something to help them feel more involved. All right, with this, we're gonna get a little interactive here. So I am looking for a volunteer to do a little bit of role playing with me. So I'm gonna have some quotes for you to read off that I'm gonna prompt you. And I am pre-assigning Marianne to be one of the people to role play with me. Marianne is going to play the reporter. I would love a volunteer to play the crew. And then I'm going to be the grantee here. So could we get a volunteer who is willing to read out a couple of lines for us?
I can do it. I'll be your crew.
Awesome. Thank you, my crew. All right. And then maybe you want to share your name and your pronouns.
My name is Kim Habus. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm with the Nikos Chinese Health Coalition.
Thank you. All right. So we are going to do together a draft messaging exercise. So I am faced with a situation. I am the grantee and help. My community grocery access grant is getting cut. So in the slides that are coming up, you, Kim, are you. So you're going to read the line under you. So I'll let you get started here.
Okay. What's going on?
Anya's Pantry, we provide grocery bags once a week to our community, families, and the mission to get case management from our partners who we share a building with that are Laura's helpers. Our grant is getting cut.
Why did they say they're cutting you?
Well, they said that people can get free food at schools and they don't need our help. And I want to pause here to say it's important to ask why. Why did they say they're cutting you? Even if this feels like, I don't want to like repeat their nonsense justification. You need to know the messaging that they're using against you. So it's important to ask this when you come in. I think Kim's line next.
Why do you disagree with that? Why?
So, well, I guess that people can get free lunch and visit a food bank, but people have come to rely on this program. We also source healthy food from local farmers. So this is when you, as like your crew member, when you're coming in to solve a problem with your colleague here, is that you want to pick apart the reasons actually why here from these initial questions that this program is important. So from Anya's answer here, you can pull out some two key details. So it means access to a priority population. You can hear with people have come to rely on this program, and you can start to think, okay, this is a population that the city is not reaching, or we are reaching them in a much more accessible way than the city is. That's a great justification. And we source healthy food from local farmers. That means that you're providing a quality service, a better quality service. So moving on to, so what do I do? And thank you, Kim, for your role here. Thanks for coming in as the crew to support me. And this is what Kim would say. Of course, in this circumstance, Kim would say, you should reach out to the People's Budget Coalition. I heard that they can help you make a plan and try to save those funds. And that's absolutely correct, Kim. The first thing you should do when you hear about a cut is reach out to us so that we can help you out in the space. So thank you, Kim, for your support and for your plug of the People's Budget Coalition. It is much appreciated. So after this conversation with your colleague who is facing a cut, you are put in touch with the People's Budget, and I'm able to connect you with a reporter. So that's going to be Marianne, and you can read out your section.
Hi, Anya and crew. The People's Budget put me in touch with you. I heard your community food bank is getting cut by the city. Can you get me a quote before my print deadline in 2 hours?
Thank you, Marianne, for your plan here. And also, like, 2 hours? Like, what do you mean, Marianne? And food bank? We're not really a food bank, but this is kind of the way that reporters talk to you. They will give you no time at all. They have kind of an idea of what's going on with you, but they also don't really understand the issue. So this is the reporter. This is the situation that you're in. You have 2 hours. What are we gonna do here? So I wanted us to, I'm gonna exit here so that we can get interactive with this. So I am going to help us sort of walk through what this looks like live so that you can see sort of an exercise on this. Okay, so don't panic. We got this. 2 hours. Building a quote to describe your entire program feels super overwhelming and like so much, and you need $10,000 as soon as possible. But let's go through these steps. We got this. We can figure this out. All right. So the issue in one sentence was sort of mentioned earlier. Our community access grant is getting cut. Awesome. That's a great starting point that will describe sort of the information. So what does the audience know already? The reporter kind of hinted at this. The reporter hinted at the idea about what the general public already knows. So they are familiar with the term food bank. People are pretty familiar. People are somewhat familiar with free lunches at school. These are programs that are pretty common knowledge. But what do they need to know in order to help? It's really important that people know that this is a community access program. So this is the thing that people need to know, and here's what they already know. So we need to meet in the middle here, because in order to help, they need to know that if you reach out to your supervisor and you say, food banks are getting cut, that's not really that helpful. I'm not really a food bank. I'm a community access program. So what we're going to do, we're going to put this into terms that people understand. So instead of the grant language, although they need to know some of it, it's important that people hear what the program actually is. So I would say a grocery access program, like a food bank, like a community-based food bank, that provides healthy groceries to low-income families. That's the problem. This is the thing at hand. And we, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes, we do have to connect it to the language that people understand. It's like a community-based thing, but it's important that they know that this is a community-based program. It's not really a food bank, but this is the terminology that people are familiar with. So a community access program, like a community-based food bank, is getting cut. What's the most compelling piece of data that I have? So me as a provider, I might think of the most compelling story that I have is that 50% of our clients don't visit any other, or maybe not don't visit, this is some good drafting, but don't have access to any other food services. So when we talked about this program with Kim, we were able to tease out that something cool about this program, something special, is that we're based in the community and we provide access very accessible access to a priority. 50% of our clients don't have access to any other food services. And a compelling story is usually it's a quote of some kind that you might have heard from a provider. A client of ours who is a single mom said of the program, I don't know where else I would. Healthy food. This is great. This is a great example of compelling quote, compelling piece of data, and we've already got a great starting point for our response. And we still have way more than 2 hours before Miriam, the reporter, is going to get back to us. So let's move on to that positive solution. There's a better way. So, so when we think about this issue, we are thinking about families who otherwise wouldn't have access to healthy food. This is a priority population, but also they deserve access to healthy food. This is the difference between us and a food bank program. So this is providing a little bit of that knowledge, and we should provide a positive vision here that speaks to what we want San Francisco to be. We should make sure as a city that everyone, that every family, because that's what we serve, has access to healthy food. Great, wonderful, positive vision here that reaffirms what we think about this. And then the call to action. So this is a reporter, as you remember. So they are going to be writing something that is read by the general public. So it's not necessarily going to be a supervisor. It's not going to be a decision maker or the mayor. So what would we want for the general public to do in their circumstance? What would be helpful? I wonder if somebody has a suggestion here, or what would be a helpful thing to ask of somebody who is going to read this article? If you want to come off mute and share an answer to that.
About please share our message far and wide.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great suggestion. Please share this message far and wide. We need your help. This is a call to action, and sometimes our reporters will be somewhat resistant to including a call to action of some kind. So sometimes they will paraphrase you. So more often, this will not be included as our quote, but we will very strongly request that the reporter includes it at some point. So most often, how this statement will be written into the article, we will provide the reporter with this. Most often they'll say, Anya's pantry is asking for this information to be widely shared in the. So this is most often what would come out of this interaction, because Marianne, as the reporter, we provide a quote. They change it up a little bit, but they should include this call to action regardless. All right, so now that we've written a little bit about that, we can come back to why does this matter? Why does it matter that this is being cut? And I think for this, we can really find the hook in our initial instincts when we talk about the program. So when Anya's Pantry was initially talking about the program, we were able to tease out why this is important. Yeah, people can get free lunch and visit a food bank, but people have come to rely on this program, and we source healthy food from local farmers. So I'm going to copy that over here so that we can speak a little bit more about this and form this into a compelling and creative book. So this is where you can speak most from the heart and really hammer down on what you actually feel about the situation. So a quote here would be like, we know people can get free lunch at school, but our community has come to rely on this program, which sources healthy food from local farmers. So this is our hook. This speaks to the heart of the circumstance, and to find this creative hook, sometimes it might include a piece of data that you think is compelling. Sometimes it might include a quote directly from a community member. But when you are asked, why does this matter? What's your instinct? Your initial gut instinct is usually right when it comes to this. So I encourage you to lean into that, dig deeper on like, why does food matter? Why does healthy food matter? Well, healthy food matters for kids because, and sort of finish the sentence here, and feel free to use free flowing, natural language. Like, this isn't that professional, very put together language. It reads with a lot of emotion. Like, we know that this can happen, that people get this, but this matters as well. So you can feel free to be a little bit more emotional. Here's where you can connect with your audience and really bring them into it. So moving back, you can find, this is where we describe the problem about what's going on. We can look back and we can find the solution that we propose. And copy that here too. And then lastly, our call to action. And here we go. So I'll read this out and make sure that all together this makes sense. So we know people can get free lunch at school, but our community has come to rely on this program, which sources healthy food from local farmers. We are a grocery access program, like a community-based food bank that provides healthy groceries for low-income families. And we are getting cut. 50% of our clients don't have access to any other food services. Client of ours who is a single mom said of the program, I don't know where else I would get healthy food. We should make sure as a city that every family has access to healthy food. Anya's Pantry is asking for this information to be widely shared. This is a rough draft of a quote, so I really appreciate that comment. Yeah, this is the kind of program that our followers should support. That is the kind of program our tax dollars should support. So this is, as you can probably read, a little clunky, doesn't flow super well together yet, but the key punchy ideas are here. So with a little bit more time, a little bit more wordsmithing, we could transform this into the perfect quote. And this really does get across everything that this needs. So within however long that was, 10, 15 minutes, we have a quote that we can now provide to Marianne. This explains the problem in a really accessible way. This describes why it's important with some data and a quote from our community members. And it brings back this positive vision and does a call to action. All of this, all at once, it's not as hard as it seems, which is really wonderful because it's really important that we are able to very quickly provide this kind of elevator pitch about our programs, because readers, donors, the general public, supervisors, the mayor, all of these folks are so short on time and so overwhelmed. Everybody is at capacity in the world. So we need to make sure that our voice gets heard succinctly and swiftly so that people hear the important information and are able to connect with it very, very swiftly. We would be lucky if this kind of paragraph would be read word for word by the mayor. that would be a dream come true. Most often, the mayor will read something along the lines of food bank gets cut, people die. That's usually as much detail as gets through to the office at that level, given how many grant programs the mayor oversees. So this really gets across those few details that then a reporter will be able to fish a headline out of here. We, of course, won't really have power over what kind of headline gets chosen, but by putting forward our voice, we can make sure that we are included in the narrative. So this is such a critical part of what we do. And I encourage everybody to feel empowered to engage in this. I encourage you to do this exercise, whether this be with your interns, your frontline staffers, or with your community members themselves. This is a quick 15-minute or so exercise that you should do frequently so that people feel empowered to speak on behalf of their community. When you ask people to come out to public comment, at some point when your program gets cut, if any grant program is funded by a foundation, by donors, by the city, we all rely on philanthropy. And it means that our programs can get cut, they can get diminished in funding. All of these things are possible. And at the situation that we're in and the economic crisis that we're facing, it's a matter of time before it affects every single one of our grant programs. So we want to be proactive now. Before cuts are confirmed, we want to be proactive that people know how to talk about the services that they're receiving and the services that they are providing. This is important. People can repeat this to supervisors. They can repeat them to their neighbors, to other people who might donate to the program, to other people who might volunteer. And not only does this help bolster your organization, it really bolsters the entire sector. We know as providers here that food security is not really talked about that often in the city. There's maybe homeless services we hear a lot more about. There's not a lot of voices on food security. There's sort of a general knowledge that people should have food, but there's not much beyond that. There's a big gap in the sector to talk about food security and why it's important to people. So I encourage you to do this exercise. Do it every 6 months in your staff meeting. Set aside 15 minutes to make this elevator pitch so that people can start working on it for the day that you need to call on them really fast, for the day that Marianne calls you up as the reporter and says, you have 2 hours, so that you can start building those skills because it matters to be used all the time. Thank you for going along with me in that exercise. That was really fun. I'm going to go back now to presenting. So I want to dig in a little bit more on how we use data and personal stories in our messaging. So with here, I wanted to share some of the most compelling data that I've heard about food. So the one in particular that really, really sticks out to me is that 45% of food stamp users are children. That's an incredible number. It really, really stuck with me when I heard that. And that's just sort of a figure that has stuck with me ever since. I think all of us as providers have some kind of statistic that just sticks with you. That when you remember that number, it reinvigorates you to keep on going. So this is an important way that we can highlight really, really impactful data storytelling. It exists, so I encourage you to think for a few minutes, like what's that piece of data that drives me, that keeps me going forward? This might be the most important data to your program. Or maybe it's not a data that relates to what you do, but maybe it's something that relates to general storytelling about data. Next, I wanted to share, this is a quote from Missouri Peace Green at SF Care. We were able to present this at the Board of Supervisors. And this is a quote, it's fairly long, but I did want to read the whole thing out, which is, we have a young lady working for us who is 8 months pregnant, and the stress alone of not having stable work is unjust. It's so hard when you're a small organization who now has to turn around and lay people off. This has made us lose trust in the city process. Why did we go through all this? applications, and advocacy just for the city to go back on the board. We're on the ropes, but we still keep doing the work because of the promise to the community. We are upholding our promise to the community, even when the city is not upholding it. Ever since Yuzuri shared this quote with me, it has resonated with me. It has stuck with me ever since then. This really speaks to the heart of what it's like to be a small organization impacted by the whirlwind of philanthropy and budget cuts and city granting. And it really connects you down to the actual people in these circumstances. There's real workers here, real clients, and this is a story that speaks to me. So I encourage you to also write down, in addition to the data that impacts you the most, I encourage you to think for a little bit, what's the story? What's the quote? What's the moment that keeps you going in your work? Is it an interaction that you saw between a client and a frontline worker? Is it when you were a frontline worker and you just saw somebody tear up after you were able to give them the food for a week and they just felt that you just saw the relief wash over their face? Is it something that somebody told you about an experience that they have? What is the story that keeps you going? This is how we can help identify the sort of narratives that are important, that are inspiring, and that keep us going in our work. So we saw here an example of data storytelling and some personal stories. So the data storytelling, what we mean when we say that is the numbers and the statistics, the percentage of people, the number of people, all of that is into data. And data can connect on impact. So this can be data about the impact of your program. We serve X number of people. Our people are 30% low income. It speaks to the impact of what you do. Data can also be need. We saw that with the data about food stamps. It speaks to the need is children. This is the population that is hungry, that needs food. Data can also include under threat. So this is capturing the problem. 50% of our funds will be cut. We're going to lose services for 59 people. Putting these things into numbers is really important, and the tangibility of the help is sort of the last thing that you can use data for. And this means if we get $10,000, we will be okay. If 3 supervisors vote for this, we will be able to be helped. If 100 people reach out to their supervisor, we can make a difference. And these are all the different ways that we can use data storytelling. For our personal stories, these are quotes, these are stories, and they're case studies. So a quote can be a direct quote from a community member or a worker. It can be a quote from yourself as one of the workers, as a leader in the organization. It can also be a story. So when it's difficult to think of how you're going to call up a client at the last minute to think of a quote, you can feel empowered to also tell a story about your experience. I heard a client say this. That's perfectly fine. That works just as good as a quote and might be easier to do on short notice. And on case studies, this sort of relates to, it should be representative of the issue at hand. So when you use a personal story, this should make you think that's what I'm trying to say. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So when you're thinking of the kind of personal stories to include in your messaging, it should make you have a reaction of, that's it. That's exactly what I've been talking about. That's a perfect example. So it should be really related to the topic at hand. Some of our clients, some of our frontline workers, and even ourselves, when we get going on quotes and storytelling, we can spin off into many different angles, many different things. But you want to keep it short. 1 sentence, 2 sentences, very, very punchy, and just exactly the things that are representative of the topic. Personal stories can also, likewise with data, show the impact of the program or the need for the program. Both of those are perfectly fine. So when you're asking for a quote for a reporter, you can share a quote that says, we really need food in San Francisco because people are starving. You can also share, this program is really important because I was able to feed this person. So you can sort of weigh which is helpful at the moment, but these are sort of the two dimensions that you want to be thinking about. Right. For this, I'm going to switch to another sort of interactive exercise here, and that there are certain places where you should use data as the cornerstone of what you're saying. So when you're describing the problem, when you're describing the impact, you should be using data mainly. There's another area where you should be mainly relying on human interest stories to describe the problem and the need for it. And sometimes you can be using both and sort of intermingling them. And it's the most common case that you can use both. So on this, I'm gonna switch this out again. So when we're using both, we just went through an example of this, and that's for reporters, articles, and general public. So, because when we think about the general public, general readership, both data and personal stories are really impactful. It's worth noting, however, that reporters and the general public also really love personal stories. So if you're going to use data, keep it brief and keep it punchy. Use one or two at most. But on those quotes, those are also really impactful. So everything should be brief and punchy and to the point. But both of these can be impactful when you're writing for the general public. But for the mayor, I wanted to share some inside knowledge here. When you're speaking with the mayor's office, any of the new policy chiefs, you should be using data. It's what we've heard in our meetings time and time again. So Daniel Lurie has what we've all been sort of privately describing as underbrain. Some of you might know Daniel Lurie's background. He founded Tipping Point, which is a foundation that some of us might receive funding from. And he absolutely has the perspective of a foundation. They know the personal interest story. They've heard it a million times. It's almost like once you get to that point, it kind of doesn't matter. It's in one ear and out the other. The mayor's time is so brief. The foundation's time is so brief. Tell us the impact. Tell us how many people you serve, how many people are going to lose service, what kind of people those are. Really, really rely on the data when you are talking to the mayor. When you talk to foundations, you often will do the same things. They are interested in the number. I think a lot of people have maybe made this error in their introduction to the mayor, is that they rely a little bit too much on the personal stories. And we've just heard that just does not really resonate. The mayor is interested in the data. And this is an important thing to keep in mind. And for the personal stories, our community members really, really like this. Our community members, as we know, our donors also really like this, especially our smaller donors really appreciate the personal impact. Whereas the big donors are a little bit more similar to the foundation. The personal stories are nice, but they also kind of want the data impact. But our community members, when you're speaking to your base, if you're based in the Mission and you're speaking to Mission Local or El Tecolote or another fellow organization, you can use the personal impact story because they know instinctively the data and the impact. If you've lived in the city, if you've received food services, if you've worked in food services, you kind of instinctively know the data of what's going on. You might not have the right grasp on what statistics mean, what statistical significance is, and that's totally all right. What's compelling to you is to be validated, to hear the stories of other people. That's an important place to use this. Reporters, as I mentioned, we use both. Generally, these supervisors, you want to use a little bit of both, because it's worth mentioning that the general public is moved by both data and personal stories. And the general public moves the mayor, and the general public moves the supervisors. So while you have to focus a lot of your impact data on the mayor, you can absolutely use your personal stories to impact the general public, who will then impact the mayor. So you can use a little bit of both. The supervisors, likewise, they have a little bit more experience in the field. So our board of supervisors should be pretty familiar with the programs enough to understand the data that you're giving them. So you can give a little bit of that impact data, but you can also give the personal story, because a lot of our supervisors are members of the community. They're meant to be representative of the community. So they're really swayed by those personal impact stories that we found. I do want to break this up a little bit more though. I want to talk about the particular supervisors who are interested in both, because we kind of have enough insight now to hear both of these. So from my experience, this is not necessarily solid or written in stone, but from my experience, this is the kind of people who you can target. District 1 Chair, Connie Chan, interested in personal stories. She knows the data, knows the impact. I'm confident that she understands everything. She's interested in hearing the personal stories. District 2, Stephen Sherrill is your supervisor out there in District 2. He's also interested in the personal stories. However, in District 3, Danny Sauter, you should go data and you should only be talking about the data. Same thing with District 4, Joel Engardio, Bilal Mahmood. In District 5, you should be focusing on the data. Matt Dorsey, District 6, data, and then we'll jump back over here. District 7, Myrna Melgar. She knows the data. She's aware. She understands the need of families. She just wants to hear the personal stories and the personal impact. I would put in a sort of unique case, if you're in District 8, in the Castro, in Noe Valley, Raphael Mandelman, sympathetic to both. So you can use a mixture of data and personal stories here. Both of them will be impactful. Or Jackie Fielder, if you're in the mission, your supervisor is Jackie Fielder, more interested in personal stories. She's a policy wonk. She's really aware of all of the data, all of the impact. She wants to hear the pulse of what's actually happening in the community. Shaman Walton is in District 10. That's Bayview Hunters Point. That's Potrero Hill. Shaman Walton is the supervisor of District 10. And I would share data with him, which isn't to say that he's not interested in the personal stories. It's more so that he's a very experienced supervisor. So he would like to hear your program. Tell us your program. Tell us the data and the impact of your program so that we can help you. So this is what would be most helpful when you speak with Shaman Walton. However, I would use one over here is Cheyenne Chen in District 11. I would use both with Cheyenne Chen. She's a very new supervisor, sort of similar to Jackie Fielder, but Jackie has a lot of policy experience, whereas Cheyenne does not have a ton of policy experience. And so that means that she needs to be informed not only about the data and the impact, but she also wants to hear your personal stories of what's happening, what's the pulse on the ground, how does this feel to the community. So I wanted to share like these like really unique insights that we have as the people's budget and who you should be using data and personal stories for. And I want to really call out and hammer home on the mayor wants to hear your data. These supervisors, they want to hear your data. You don't need to waste your time with the personal stories. And the worst thing that you can have in a meeting with a supervisor or a ledge aide, regardless of the best intentions from their side, sometimes their eyes can glaze over. They've heard these things a million times. So you want to be really, really punchy and really to the point. You really want to prevent the glazed over eyes. That means that they're no longer listening to you because they've heard it before. Even though, of course, that should never happen. But we do live in a world where meetings are sometimes repetitive, and you might have heard this a million times. So this is the best way that I think that you can get those points across. So I hope that's really helpful. I wanted to pause here to see if anybody has any questions, any additions that I could make to this section that would be helpful.
I have a question, Anya. So echoing the chat, this is super duper helpful. I think one thing that I'd be curious to get sort of your guidance or insight on is the staffer interaction. And oftentimes, I mean this not at all in a disparaging way, but they are very young people who like may or may not seemingly have a lot of experience or knowledge of the community. So wondering like in a meeting, how do you sort of take the temperature of a staffer and decide which approach to use?
That is a phenomenal. I'm gonna get really in depth here because I think I have some really good feedback for this. So when you request to meet with Connie Chan, you are going to meet with Frances Say. It's most often who you're going to get connected to. If you're meeting with Frances, you should share the data. It's a little interesting because if you're meeting with Connie herself, you should share the personal story. But if you're only meeting with Frances, she already knows. She's been in the community forever. In District 2, you can still just share the personal stories, even though I believe it's Mike Del Rosario in his office. I think personal stories, I think it's still helpful. In District 3, it is Ida Bell who you will meet with. You should still focus on the data. I forget the name of a Engardio staffer. You can still share the data on that. For Bilal Mahmood, I actually think I forget the name of his staffer, but I think that you should share the personal story with Mahmoud's staff. They seemed very, very receptive when we had meetings with the staff. They seemed very interested in the on the ground knowledge on this. For District 6, same thing. You can use the data. For Myrna Melgar's office, I would say that you can still just rely on personal stories. You'll be meeting with Jen Lowe. You can still share those personal stories, but sometimes you can share the data too. Jen Lowe will probably be interested in that. Or Jackie Fielder, you will probably meet with Tom or Preston Kilgore. You can double down, share the personal stories. For Shamad Walton, we'll meet with Tracy Arado, and you should share the data. So I hope that this is a great example for you on how it kind of shifts, because some of these people are more experienced than the supervisor. Ida Bell has more experience than Danny Sauter in being in office. So you can really rely a lot more on the data. Francis has way more experience than Connie, who still has a lot of experience. But Francis wants to hear good numbers in particular. She is, for context, Connie Chan is the budget chair. And so Francis Say is the budget aide. So she is looking for the numbers. She's not here to listen to your story again about how this impacts the community. She needs your numbers, she needs your data. But if you're speaking one-on-one with Connie, absolutely share that personal data and personal experience, because Francis will do the data. That was a great question. I'm glad I got to elaborate on. And now I'm going to open it up to questions on the whole training. Before we'll have a discussion section after this and some breakouts. But any more questions on messaging and on personal storytelling? All right, perfect. I think we'll move on. Feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm really happy that this was so helpful. This is so much fun to be able to share this, and I'm glad we got to share some of our personal insights. The people's budget, we have this experience. We do that, all we deal with all the time is people who are getting cuts and dealing with the supervisors. So if you ever have a question, if you need help making the connection, we can definitely do that. That's our bread and butter as a coalition. Even if you don't necessarily want to do actions or you're not ready for a press conference, we can help you come up with a plan that works best. So I see Laura has a hand raised.
Yeah, sorry. I just thought of two other folks that I at least know Shape Up's going to be meeting with, and there's Kunal Modai and Shalini, who, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what her new title is, but I think she's like the assistant to the chief of homelessness. She's the assistant to Kanal, I think. So yeah, as we approach meetings with those two folks, what would you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. If you might have heard of the new policy chief system. So Daniel Lurie is introducing policy chief that will cover certain areas. There's like public safety, health and homelessness. Just so that you know, if you ever reach out to any of them, you will be directed to Kunal Modi. So that's your policy chief. That's every nonprofit policy chief. Even if it doesn't seem like it should be based on the description, it is. So we've been referred to him over and over again. So with Kunal Modi, some good background to know about him is that he was on the board of directors for a number of nonprofits, including Larkin Street Youth Services. So you should share data. When you speak to him, you should be thinking of him as if he's a funder at a foundation. So share that impact data, share that knowledge. He might be a little bit familiar, but he doesn't know any of the programs in detail or in depth. So share that data. I'm not familiar with his assistant, but I'm assuming it'll be the same thing. You might also meet with Ali Bond. If you request a meeting with the mayor, people are frequently getting connected to her. She's very familiar with the community, with personal stories. So I'll share a lot of that impact data. If you ever get directed to either of the two community liaisons, when you reach out to the mayor, you usually get connected to EJ Jones, Ernest Jones, or Hansu. So you get connected to one of the two. You should share personal stories. They are the comms people. They are going to give a couple of word sentences to the mayor to say, this matters. We need to look into this. So these are the kind of people that share the first. Share that. Any more questions? This is great. Yeah. So we can always help you strategize over here at People's Budget. This is a mess, as you can see. This is kind of how politics works. It's very messy, very relational, very based on person to person, on their experience and their background. So we hope that we can be supportive in how you craft your message here. And with that, you can connect organizations with me. My email is here. You can feel free, reach out to email me anytime. Yeah, we can connect. I can find a meeting time with you, or if we ever email, that works too. So that's the best way to connect with us. And with that, I'm going to move us into the breakout rooms. So you're going to have some time in these breakout rooms. We're going to give you 20 minutes. And we're also going to give you a big task. But as you saw, it's an achievable task. So I'm going to give you a task here on creating a pitch to the supervisors to fund food security. Now we just went over which supervisor likes which, but imagine that you are writing one to all of the. So you're going to use both data and personal stories as you do this. And I'm going to have 3 breakout rooms. I think would be most helpful. In these breakout rooms, I'm going to have folks write your 1 paragraph quote. What are you going to do to the supervisor to request more money for healthy food provision in the city? And with that, we have the question for you to refer back to. Here's sort of your prompt here as you get this together. And the way that we are going to do this is you're going to access these slides and you're going to be able to edit them. So I encourage you to get onto these slides. I'll link it in the chat. You can type your notes in these sticky notes right here, and then put your final drafted statement up here as a group. And we're going to come back in 20 minutes. So let's see, it's around 1:15. So we're going to come back at around 1:35, 1:40 to discuss the strengths and the weaknesses of each statement. Get involved even more here. And with that, I'm going to my screen share. and get you all linked into the slides so that you can start to edit them. Any questions before we get into the breakout rooms about what we're doing in the rooms? Perfect. I'm gonna get us in there and I will write your names up at the top for you to remember which room you're in. In all rooms, you have now been invited to join a breakout room. So go ahead and join your breakout room. Slide 24. So to close us off in this meeting here, I wanted to end us on some other tools that the People's Budget Coalition has available. Here is our advocacy action plan that we've been providing to groups. This is what a roadmap of your advocacy looks like over the next few months. So you can see on here, this is sort of the things that you should be looking out to do throughout the process. So from now until June, at what points that you should be really like leaning on meeting with supervisors. Thank you. On what points you should be meeting with supervisors and sort of the purpose and the question you should answer with your advocacy. I won't get into it too much because this resource will be available to you, and feel free to reach out. People's Budget, what we can help you with is to make an action plan for your organization. Or if you face a grant cut, we can make an action plan for restoring that grant cut. Because sometimes different strategies are useful for different organizations. So here's a resource that's available for you guys. If you want to go to the next slide, Mary. This is the timeline that folks should think about for the local city budget here. We are now in the supervisor kind of portion for March. What the supervisors do during this time is set their priorities. So they're sort of putting out feelers, trying to figure out what they want to prioritize. April and May is really the mayor's budget. So he has everything. If you try to meet with supervisors about the budget in April, they usually are gonna say, I don't know, go speak to the mayor. I don't have anything to do right now. By May, you can start to meet with the supervisors again on budget because the mayor's budget comes out June 1st. So they will directly be able to comment on it after June 1st. So May, you can definitely start meeting with supervisors. So as a recap, these are sort of your targets for each timeline of this. We can move on to the last slide here. Just to wrap us up on who People's Budget is, this is a little bit of our storytelling and data messaging here on the kind of work that we do. And just to share that we're here for you. We're a community resource, regardless of whether or not you're a formal member. We're pretty informal as an organization. And it means that I'm our staff member, so absolutely feel free to reach out. My email will be provided in the link. It's also in the slide at the very beginning. Feel free to reach out with any questions. I want to share that this budget process and meeting with supervisors and the politics is meant to be a barrier. It's meant to make you feel drained, confused, discouraged, like you don't have the right tools for the job. So I want to share that we have your back. You can consider the People's Budget your assistant in this area so that we can do the messy nonsense stuff that you shouldn't have to engage in as a priority organization doing incredible work on the ground. Let us do some of the hard work for you, whatever that looks like. So thank you all so much for coming to this training, and I'll close us up there. And if there's any questions, feel free to pop up. But thank you all so much. This is really fun and like such a bright spot in my week to meet with you all and to hear a little bit about the conversation. This is really cool. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.